Hello, everybody. Happy New Year. It is so exciting to see you here for the very last panel of 2022. We're going to be talking about young adult epic fantasy. We have Jasmine, we have um, C.H. Smith, hey, and we are just so excited to share what is coming up in 2023, kick off the new year with you guys. If this is the first panel you've joined for our indie author kickoff, we have had 5 other panels today, 20 other authors. You can catch all of those replays on my YouTube, and there will be a total of 16 panels between today and Monday and over 60 authors. So hopefully you can find some new indie reads for the new year. But just to get started, I know CH and I know Jasmine, but it's our first time ever talking face to face. It's so surreal. So why don't we go around? Hey, Angela.
Hi, I'm trying to get my headset to work and it's not working.
Oh, well, that's okay. We're going to go around and everybody introduce ourselves, talk a little bit about what we write, and hopefully we can get your headset working during that time. Jasmine, would you like to kick us off and we can just go clockwise?
Yeah, for sure. I'm excited to see everybody and to meet everybody. My name is Jasmine Young. I'm the author of Stormfire. Some of you may have seen it on Amazon. And I currently write epic fantasy. I'm on the young adult fantasy panel, although my characters are young adult and they are teen. Currently, actually, this very recently, I started marketing as epic fantasy. So I guess I can be in both realms, but I'm definitely excited to be here and to meet all of you.
I think a lot of us write sort of more than one genre, but young adult epic is very near and dear to my heart because it's sort of what got me started writing is after reading all those books growing up. But CH, speaking of books that can be read by anybody of any age, The Princess Knight is how I got to meet you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you write? You've got more books from besides The Princess Knight, a lot in the last year.
Yeah, well, a lot coming up this year. I'm C.H. Smith. I write young adult fantasy. My debut book was The Princess Knight, a fantasy tale with real life stakes. It kind of starts in this world and goes into a fantasy world and back and forth as a man tells a story. Has a very fairy tale feel. I kind of wanted you to have never ending story vibes when you read it, so to speak. And my next one uses a couple characters that were in there, but it's strictly a fantasy book. It is book 1 of the Dragon's Honor series, Nothing More Than Zero, and Zero is the dragon's name. Book 2 for that series, Worth Less Than Zero, comes out mid-February, which is pretty exciting. And a standalone that is more in the I don't know. I like the real world. I like the C.S. Lewis real world portal fantasy, but not portal type deal. I don't know. We're going to have another standalone book along that line just later on this year coming up as well. And I'm pretty excited. And I like dogs, so there's going to be a dog in this one. And spoiler alert, the dog's name is Arrow. I've always wanted a dog named Arrow. I've never had a dog named Arrow, so I'm going to write about a dog named Arrow. Dadgummit.
Say, Mrs. Smith, 1 year, CH wants a dog named Arrow. So good to have you on, and thank you for coming back. CH was on the panel last year, as well as our midway through the year summer kickoff, so it's going to be exciting to see what all has come out of this year, because I know I've seen collaborations with you and a lot of other people as well. Angela, this is my first time actually getting to talk to you in person as well. It's so nice to meet you.
You too.
Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you write?
So, my name is Angela. I write young adult fantasy. I feel like my stuff kind of toes the line into new adult, because new adult isn't like a real category, but it kind of is. But I like to write young adult about a little bit older characters. So it's kind of like upper YA, older teenagers, kind of maybe early 20s. But the one and only book that I have out currently is called The Thief's Relic. It is a YA epic fantasy with some like Lord of the Rings kind of vibes, because I mean, like a lot of fantasy authors, I'm heavily inspired by Lord of the Rings. But it is about a thief who becomes a honest merchant. He gives up the lifestyle, and he discovers that he's in possession of magic that is not believed to exist in the world anymore. And so that makes him a target for someone who is trying to unite the country under his rule with the use of magic. He's in search of this magic. So I'm actually currently writing the second book. I wanted to have it out before now, but better late than never, right? So my goal is for it to be out in June or July of 2023. And then I'll just hop into book 3. It's going to be a trilogy, and I'll hop into book 3 shortly after that one gets out. So yeah.
Oh, Katherine, you're on mute.
I don't know. My mic's like,
Okay.
nope.
I thought it was just me for a second.
Series wrap-ups. Thank you, Jasmine. I'm like, what is going on with my mic?
No problem.
Yeah, I think the fact that new adult is now officially a category on Amazon made my heart very happy as a new adult writer myself. But for those who are newer and aren't aware, there are some publishers that still don't recognize new adult as a category yet. So if you're dabbling into writing, you can pick it as a category, but that's more for like the 18 to 23. So upper YA, it's hard because YA goes from 12 to 18 usually. And there's such a big gap between making something that a 12-year-old will enjoy that will also keep the attention of an 18-year-old. And I take my hat off to YA authors because it's so hard. I have not written much YA, but have major admiration for everything you do. So Jasmine, what kind of books and editing, writing, publishing do you have in the works for 2023?
Oh, that's such a loaded question, I think, for all of us. So this is actually going to be one of the biggest years for me. It's unique because I actually hit my 3rd year of being a indie published author back in November.
Congrats!
And yeah, it was really great because I would say the first 3 years, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was 26 years old. I really wanted to be published. I thought that I knew it all. I had been studying writing for so long. And the book that I currently am relaunching, Stormfire, in 2 days, I had been writing for 15 years. So I thought I knew everything there was to know, but on Amazon, the market is different. You got to know what the market wants. And so 3 years into this journey, things just really started to click for me. And so I decided to make a business decision. Either I could start a new series and hope that it would gain more traction than what I currently had going on with Four Kingdoms Origins, or I could relaunch. And I decided, just having invested so much time and so much effort and resources into that series, I wanted to relaunch it knowing the things that I had learned along the way. And so I'm really confident this next year, everything that I've learned in terms of how to write to market, things that we've been hearing about from a lot of successful indie authors, that's really my focus for next year. So in 2 days, Stormfire 2023 is relaunching. This is going to be my biggest launch of the year and honestly of my career. So far, the pre-orders are just skyrocketing. Like, it's looking really good. It's very surreal. Like, going from like no sales to like super crazy. Like, it's exploding. So things are looking really good. So I would say that's my focus for next year, is really just pushing Stormfire, that being the first book in the series. And then I'm going to try to be a little bit aggressive, but I'm trying to get book 2 rewritten as well as book 3. So my aim is 3 books out for next year, maybe 4, but we'll see.
And I was wondering, because I do have your first book pre-ordered. I was wondering what let you know that you needed to do the relaunch. Was it editing? Was it cover? Was it reviews? Is that something that you would recommend to authors who are struggling with sales?
Yeah. So first, I want to say thank you for pre-ordering. I definitely appreciate that. The second thing is, I think it really just boils down to, is it a good business decision? Because I actually had somebody on Instagram tell me that she'd seen a post I'd written regarding relaunching Stormfire, and she'd reposted it to her writing group. And some people thought it was a great idea. Some people thought it was a huge waste of time. And I shouldn't be doing that. And mind you, I didn't know any of these people, but she was telling me this feedback. And so I think bottom line is, you really have to study the market. the first 3 years I wasn't doing that. And when I mean study the market, I mean one of the big things is reading within your niche. Like you've got to read other indie authors within your niche and understand down to the T, what is your niche? Because I thought fantasy was fantasy, but there's epic fantasy, there's YA fantasy, there's new age fantasy, and you got to know those nuances if you want to be really successful. And so I think it was a combination of reading, just there were some really major books this year that I'd read by indie authors we probably all heard of here. And after I got done with those books, that's where it really clicked. And so for me, the reason why I feel like it was a good idea for me was looking at the reviews I was getting. Like, I think it's good to view your reviews, because if you start to see a pattern of what people are seeing over and over again, I think that's something for you to make note of. And so that was, I think, really big for me, was seeing the patterns, being really discouraged that the sales weren't there, but being very confident that the idea I had was very marketable. And so I think, again, you just got to understand what the market is looking for. If you can take your original idea and just repackage it and rewrite it, and that is what the market wants, then I would say go for it. If it's not, then I would say maybe consider starting a new series or a new book. So it's kind of vague, but I think it really is going to depend on your individual situation.
Absolutely. And I love how you clarify the writing to market, because I think a lot of us newer authors, because I've only been doing this for like a year and a half, we hear the word write for market and we're like, oh, just write what they're buying, even if we don't feel like writing it, and that's going to make money. And that's not what it means. It means clarifying which market wants your specific book and making sure that it meets those expectations, and that what I originally published as an epic fantasy is actually a dark fantasy, and the epic fantasy readers are going to want the happy ever after. They're going to want this, so I think that's really valuable advice that I wish I had had much earlier in my writer journey, and a lot of wisdom there. And if you're a reader, just know that we indie writers are trying to get the books you love to you. That's what all this boils down to.
Yeah, and if I can add to that too, if you're a reader, reviews. I mean, I think everybody who's a reader hears about how important reviews are to indie authors, but it truly is, because it helps us grow. It really does. So don't be nasty. You can be honest, but it really does help us learn and, of course, gain exposure for sure.
Mm-hmm. Angela, did you have anything to add to that point too?
Well, I mean, those are all like, I'm learning from that, because I still feel like a baby author. My book has only been out in the world for a little over a year, and I am still learning a lot and figuring out exactly like what works for me. And relaunch is something that, has kind of like come up in my mind every now and then. So yeah, that's some, like, I'm even learning in this. So that's great. And I don't know if it's something that I would necessarily do, but it's nice to know that like other indies are doing it and they're being successful with it. And they're finding like that, hey, this is something that works for me. So that's good to hear.
Mm-hmm. Like, I'm on the opposite coin of Jasmine, where I have The Violet Twisted Fate, and it did really good, and it placed in its finalist in its competition that I put it in. But I realized that I knew it was very niche when I put it out. And it wasn't necessarily that it was in the wrong genre. It's just that it was a standalone, which isn't super popular in that genre, and many other things. So I'm shifting my focus in 2023 to a new series, which is one of the options Jasmine had mentioned. You can move forward and say that's past, that's behind, I'm going to move forward with my business. Or you can rebrand, relaunch, and put out. And CH, you rebranded The Princess Knight this year.
Yeah, we
about that.
I started with a cover that was made locally by one of my good friends. He's a comic book guy, and this being my first one, it had all the feels of back home. I want everybody to be able to see it and all that good stuff. And he did a great job for me. But I wanted to reach a little more of an epic audience. It did a real good job of having that 1980s never-ending story feel. And I just wanted to kind of move into more of an epic, because I knew my next series was going to be, an epic quest type deal. I switched the cover up, kind of changed the way I was marketing a little bit, and the relaunch was pretty successful. this upcoming year, I've already said I'm going to have book 2 out, and I'm going to do a standalone. One thing I didn't mention about this upcoming year that's pretty exciting, and maybe I should have told you ahead of time. We have a little Instagram group that we help promote together, 7 or 8 of us, and we're going to do a collaboration. We're going to do a little short story collaboration this year that's kind of all themed and work together. There'll be a central character that kind of weaves through all the short stories, and I'm just going to present that to the group here in the next couple of weeks, so you'll get to see that, and that's going to be pretty exciting. So it's going to be a jam-packed year for me for sure.
That's really exciting. Yes. And so I know I've seen your new cover. It's stunning. Have you seen more interest since you changed the cover and since your relaunch?
I'll tell you what I have seen. I've seen more ebook sales significantly since the rebranding and the new cover. I seem to sell more paperbacks, and I don't know if that was because of my first book, first time out, and all that good stuff. That's why I sold so many paperbacks early. But yeah, definitely the ebook sales and the KU reads have went up significantly with the change in cover. And kind of a different field of my marketing and what I'm putting on social media, how my A+ content, the stuff you see from publisher on Amazon, kind of changed that up a little bit and went a little more epic with it. And I have seen an increase on the e-market side, the ebook side.
Yeah, and that's really a great point. We've been talking a little bit in a couple of the other panels today about how we really do judge a book by its cover, no matter what the nice version of the meaning behind that. Right. We do. We buy
absolutely
its cover. But yeah, a lot of great things happening this year. I'm so excited to have authors at so many different stages of the journey to joining us for the panel. And Happy New Year, Caitlin. Thank you for stopping in. Hi, Marvin. Hi, Luna. It's great to see so many people. So if you're watching live, please drop your questions in the chat. I will pull them up on the screen if they're on YouTube. If they're social, I will have to pull them up on my cell phone because those don't feed into here. But we will be happy to answer your questions. And if you missed the live and you're watching the replay and you have questions, feel free to drop those in the comments and I'll make sure they get to the authors. So we're going to answer a couple pre-submitted questions from social, and then we will answer anything else that came up in the chat. But what is the difference between a young adult fantasy and a regular a regular epic fantasy? And anybody who wants to jump in is free to jump in.
Yeah, I think the clinical definition is a young character, a young adult character on following them as they grow, and the theme, you keep it a little cleaner and to a younger audience. I will say it's centered for me personally, and I think you see the genre going this way. It's more about the theme and what the content is more than the age of a character. I cannot wait for somebody to do it. Well, I've tried to do a 40-year-old, just got laid off, retired, whatever character in a young adult setting. I want to see that done well because I think the age of the characters, it's easier for a younger adult reader to relate to that. But if it's done well, I think the theme and the content within is more important to the young adult genre than the age of the character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I just think of my book Stormfire. I've had occasionally some people say that it's young adult, and I think that's completely my fault because I had primed them to think that way when I first launched it. The first version of Stormfire, it was very kid-focused. I think, as CH mentioned, it's really the themes and the content and what the character goes through that makes it YA or not, and not necessarily the age of the character, because I've recently been reading a lot of epic fantasy where the main characters are between 15 and 19, but there may be more violence, there may be more swearing, there may be more focus on the adult world. And so I think that's where CH nailed it, is that it's not so much the age, but what is the content? Like, is this content more suited for a young adult or is it not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many expectations. What about you, Angela? What do you think makes the difference between a young adult and a regular epic fantasy?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that's something that I wish I could see more of, because I feel like, so I write towards a YA audience versus writing YA characters, if that makes sense. And I wish there was more of like a distinct, separation there, because a lot of times readers say, oh, it's YA, and they zoom in on thinking, oh, the characters are going to be YA, but really my audience is YA. My audience is, and I mean, I like to read YA, so it's not like hard and fast rule, but the audience is generally 12 to 18. And so you're writing things that can relate to a YA audience. The things that the characters are going through, they can relate to, even if, like CH was saying, it's a 40-year-old, if it's still something, the overall themes are something that the 12 to 18-year-old category of readers can relate to, then that's where I think you're writing to YA.
Yeah, there's like several different approaches. The overall, I think, feel, the level of profanity, the level of violence, the description you use of gore or romance versus, you can be very detailed, or you can be less detailed, and all of that. CH's book has a ending, and I'm not going to spoil it, that some people might be like, that's in a YA book with this ending because it's a heavier topic. But the way he wrote it was open enough that a parent could sit down with their younger YA child and talk more about what had happened. And it might not be as jarring. And you have to sort of tread very carefully with that for YA versus an adult book where you can just say, so-and-so had this happen, and then that was that. But yeah, we got some good questions. I love, because we have readers and writers that tune into these panels. So Marvin says, I have 3 trilogies in my head. I write music and poetry. As a neophyte author, what's a great way to start? Also, do you write stories then convert them to young adult?
Well, I'll get started with this. The best way to get started with the stuff in your head is to get it on paper. And I know that sounds simple, but to putting your butt in a seat and putting your fingers on the keyboard and I have to do this with me all the time. Make myself sit down and write, because I have planned and I have world built, and man, my characters have done a lot that nobody will ever know because I haven't got it on the paper yet. So sit down and write is the best way to go. But no, there is going to be a lull. Or at least for me, I know the beginning, I know the end. It's that stuff in the middle that you just got to push through. And I'm one of those guys. If I write the ending down, if I go ahead and get it on paper, you can forget the middle, because it's never going to happen. I have to write it in order, or I'll lose complete interest. But sit down and start writing. Figure out the one that you are the most passionate about of your 3 trilogies. It may not be the most important one. It may not be the most sellable one you're most passionate about, because you're going to take it a lot. You're going to take it very serious, and you're going to learn a lot more if you start that route, in my opinion.
Allow yourself to not be perfect. There's a meme I saw that everybody's first draft is garbage. Yeah. What do you think, Jasmine?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I was going to say that's the nice way. Everybody's first draft is fill in the blank. But yeah, no, I think that CH really nailed it again. What I do, so I am a really huge planner, organizer. I just went through a huge move today, so I'm kind of like running all over the place. My hair is not straight. Like it's just a little bit crazy today. I'm in my lumberjack shirt, but I need to know when I'm moving. I need to know what time the movers are here. So down to the detail, I need to know the T's. I understand that everybody writes differently, but I would encourage you, Marvin, to really think about, at the very least, having a premise. So what is your overall story about? And then just having a very general outline. If you are not a plotter at all and you're a pantser, meaning that you tend to like to just write, I think that's okay, but have a general idea, like have the major plot points down so that gives you a guiding post as you're writing. And then, as everybody here has been mentioning so far, you just got to write. And It's so true that your first draft is going to be garbage. And when you're thinking about, okay, how do I convert that to a young adult framework? You might not even end up doing that. So I can say for myself, every time I write, I'll have a set idea of what I want to do. But the first draft is so hard because it's so messy. And for those of us who are perfectionists, it'll freak you out. And like the sagging middle, as CH mentioned, it just makes you freak out and think, oh my gosh, my career is over. This is going to be my worst book ever. My last book was my best one that I'm ever going to write. But the thing is, you just got to get through that first draft, because the whole purpose of that draft is to flesh out the true ideas. Like, you're going to have ideas that you start out with, but then you're going to find the gems that you actually end up going with that may be completely different. So I would say if your end goal is to convert something to a young adult framework, or you're aiming for young adult, I would go for it, but allow yourself the creative freedom in case that changes, and just write just write as much as you can, and let that first draft just be you hashing everything out.
Angela, what would you say, since you are the newest published out of the group, but not far behind me, honestly, maybe like 3 or 4 months behind me? What would you say about, great way to start writing?
Yeah, I agree. Just getting stuff down on paper. One of my favorite quotes is, you can edit a bad page, but you can't edit a blank page. And that is something that I have lived by when it's really hard to get words on paper, because I too am a perfectionist, and I'm like, my first draft has to be perfect. And it's so hard when it's not. But just getting those words out and knowing yes, okay, this story that was in my head is right here, and you can work it and tweak it and read back through it, and you can completely rewrite it. I wrote the first draft of my book years ago, and then I came back and was in the process of revising, and I chunked 10 chapters, completely removed them from the book and rewrote them, because I felt like the story needed to go in a different direction. So do allow yourself that freedom to change things, to, you don't have to be locked into a certain idea that you have. That's something that you just kind of have to go with the story sometimes and see where it works and where it doesn't. So yeah, and getting through those hard times, just writing something, even if it's something that you're not going to keep, even if it's something that, it just gets those juices flowing, and it helps keep it up when you're a little bit, trying to get started writing in the first place.
Yeah. And I would say what you just said, Angela, about letting the story sort of be what it's going to be, includes the age range. You might think that you're writing young adult and that's your goal and that's your dream. But if it comes out and the story that wanted to be written, as Luna says here, does your story ever take on a life of its own? For me, that's all the time. If you end up with a book that's not young adult, that's okay. There's a genre for everything if you look hard enough. So if you get in and it needs something darker or deeper, look at new adult, look at regular trade or adult epic fantasy.
So a good example of that, The Princess Knight was supposed to be a short story. I was writing a book about kind of a Southern literature type deal. Boy and his dad, he's getting to spend his first weekend at the hunting camp, and all the old men, they get snowed in or rained in or whatever, and they have a very Geoffrey Chaucer-esque story contest, right? Well, when I started writing that short story, I put my first project aside. And The Princess Knight that was the story I needed to tell. I just had to write an extra 40,000 words in front of it to get to it. But I found out that that's the story I wanted to tell, and it wasn't supposed to be that way. So that's why I tell everybody that wants to write, sit down and write, because you never know where it's going to take you.
And I love how Marvin points this out. Have you guys heard of pantser, planter, planner? Like pantser, or there's another politically correct term that just came out for it that I don't know. I am a pantser, and I'm just going to stick with that. I fly by the seat of my pants. I have no idea what I'm going to write. I open a blank page on NaNoWriMo day one, and whatever comes out, and then fix it in post. And then planters sort of plan, but they also have a loose outline, and that outline is usually less fleshed out. And then the planners, my husband is a planner. His outline has outlines, and I'm not even kidding. There's spreadsheets to outline the character portion of his outline. It's just everything has an MIBL personality type. So it's like different levels of planners. So what are you guys? Are you pantser, planner, plancer?
I'm definitely like your husband. I have an outline within the outline. My outlines are a novel in itself. I was looking at one yesterday. I had to find some old research. So I was digging through. It was 40,000 words because I was just outlining and outlining. And so, yeah, I just get really nervous if I don't outline. I think it's part of being a perfectionist. I just have to know what's going to happen. Even if I scrap it, as Angela mentioned, you might end up scrapping 10 chapters. That's okay. I just need to know what happens next. And so that's the way that I write. And it looked like Marvin had asked a question about kind of the different ways of writing, which is what you have been referencing, Katherine. So I think there's no one right way. There's absolutely no one right way. You just have to really know what is your own personality, what flows naturally for you. And I think that when it comes to writing, I just always feel like the analogy of like a sculpture is what comes to mind. You're chiseling away. So like your first draft, you might not know the ending, Marvin, but it's okay. You just write your first draft. That's like a hunk of clay that's like so unmolded. But as you write your first draft, you're molding it, you're starting to chisel things away until it becomes your perfect masterpiece, which is the very end. So I think the process itself doesn't matter. But again, for myself, I'm definitely a plotter.
That's awesome. How about you, Amanda? You're a pantser, or Angela, sorry. I don't know where my brain is tonight. I've been doing too many panels and all the names are meshing together. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so I thought for a long time that I was more like plotter planner, and I am, but I think I have a little bit of a wiggle room. So I'm on the plotter side of a plantser. So I do have my outlines. I cannot sit down and just start writing. I have like mad respect for people who can, because if I tried to do that, like my story would end up in Timbuktu. Like I have no idea what would happen. So I have to have direction, but not to the point where if things start to kind of happen and change the story, then I'm like, oh, well, let's see how, like, where this leads, and so I'm open to that happening. And that's actually happened a few times in the draft that I'm writing right now. I'll just be like writing away, and then something will pop up and I'll be like, that's an interesting idea that I hadn't thought of before. Let's see how I can make that work in this. So I definitely have to have some kind of a plan, but I like to let the story kind of influence itself and see where it goes. Just a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit.
CH, where do you fall? Well, you said you have your beginning and ending.
Yeah.
So you're like a plantser?
Well, no, definitely. I have to have an outline, but my outline is only for about a chapter out. So as I'm writing a book, I'm writing my outline. I've tried to outline the whole thing before. Then you get 7 chapters in, you got to rewrite your outline because you went in a completely different direction. I guess I am a discovery writer. I can think about it all I want to, but when I get in front of a keyboard, it changes. I'm definitely the oldest person here. I like to write with a pen and a piece of paper, dadgummit. So I do my outline on pen and a piece of paper, and I type on a computer, obviously. But I like the feel of a pen on paper, so I'm outlining as I go, and I'll have 2 or 3 chapters, and I'll write those, and then I'll start outlining the next. And I don't try to get too far ahead in my outline. Just so I don't waste the time and the effort and the energy when I decide, when one of my characters decides to take a left turn in a no left zone, So I guess I'm a plantser. I don't know.
Like, we got some advice from the panel before this one. There are 2 authors on there who have 15, I think, and 30 years of writing and publishing and coaching experience between like the 2 of them. And one of the things that one of them said is that you really need to read. I think it was one of them. There were 4 people on that panel, but that you need to read your genre. And really, that's what this is all about. Most of us don't take courses. You don't go to school to learn how to write. You can, and that's great, but you don't have to. It doesn't have to be perfect or professional, the first draft. There are beta readers to help you. There's developmental editors that can help you focus in on what you need to expand and do better as you go through. But really, for your very first book, just writing something, getting it down and getting used to writing, I think is the biggest hurdle, because a lot of us, like my husband, planned for years before he finally let himself write. And it took participating in NaNoWriMo one year to just write. I was like, just give yourself permission to just write. Even if you don't use it, just to write nothingness. But yes, lots of great questions. Good luck, Marvin, on your writing journey. I dropped a link in the comments for you about AutoCrit's dialogue that should help with the dialogue question you left. There's a lot of free author resources too that are just really helpful. So moving on with our YA epic fantasy journey, what made you guys decide to go the indie route? Because we've talked to people today who are doing indie, having left traditional behind, like Caitlin Legaspi did on the last panel. We have people who tried and then decided this was better just to do indie, and people who knew they wanted to do indie from the start. Where do you guys fall?
So for me, it was indie by necessity, in the sense of I had queried my book Stormfire so many times. I queried another book and it just kept getting rejected. And after the third time of querying Stormfire during a separate year, I just decided, well, what the heck? There's nothing left to lose. I'm just going to go ahead and indie publish. And at the time, I was part of the very traditional camp that thought that was vanity publishing and it just wasn't official to be indie published. So I came from that other side of the camp. And since then, I have to say, I mean, it really depends on what your end goal is, but being indie published has been the best decision, the best thing, honestly, that's happened definitely within my career. And the reason why I'm so glad, and I encourage anybody who's thinking about the two, is because first of all, you're in complete control. You can decide what your next business project is going to be. You can scrap something, you can relaunch something. But I would say the biggest blessing of all has been being able to be in close contact with your readers. As I'm getting closer to my launch, just the people on my mailing list especially have been so gracious and so supportive, and the advanced reviews that they're leaving. And some of them are pre-ordering and also leaving me an ARC review. I'm like, wow, you guys are so amazing. And they know how much it means to me, but they're also, for the first time, it's shifting from, hey, I just want to support you, to, hey, actually, I'm interested in this and I want to support you. And that feeling is just really priceless when people can come to you and say, hey, your book has really changed my life. It really touched me. I want to stay on your list. Like, that is just such a special feeling. Or like, just another example to encourage some people who are thinking about indie is, I had recently run a holiday giveaway, and I had told the folks specifically on that distribution list that if I did not hear from them by the very end, so I had announced the prize winner. If I didn't hear from them anymore, then I would just go ahead and remove them from the distribution so that they wouldn't continue to get unsolicited emails from me. If they wanted to stay on, they could subscribe to my newsletter here, or they could just let me know. And a lot of people actually were frantically like, no, keep me on your list, keep me on your list. I'm like, wow, I've never had that happen before. I've had to beg people to join my list. And so it just really starts to change as you go on your indie journey and you're writing to market and you're outreaching, you're collaborating with other amazing authors like the people on this panel. I would say that just makes indie so worth it. And you're in charge of your own marketing. I have to say, I've seen some folks who went the traditional route, and I don't see that they're getting the promotion with their publishing houses. And maybe it's just the ones I'm looking at, but I would say the majority of like the mid-list authors or the new authors, I'm seeing their launches and beautiful covers, but they're just not getting that marketing and advertising. But when you're an indie, you're forced to learn that by necessity. So for me, a short answer is I didn't plan on becoming indie, but I would not go back. In the future, for sure, I'd love to be traditionally published, maybe for another project, but for now, I can't imagine not doing indie.
How about you, CH? I know you've shared this before with us, but there's a lot of new readers
Yeah,
watching.
absolutely. Look, I was just so dang proud that I got a book written. I wasn't going to wait for a query and months and this, that. I wanted everybody to know I wrote a book, and
Yeah.
so that's how it started. And I was, the Princess and I did, exceeded my expectation, and it's touched so many readers that I decided to just go ahead. Let's go ahead and keep going this route. And I want to be traditionally published one day. I think that's a worthy goal. But right now, to me, getting my stories out there and letting people meet my characters is way more important than letting it sit in a desk drawer while somebody decides if they can publish it or not.
Right. And Angela, so coming in at this from a brand new angle.
Yes. So I had thought for years and years and years that I would query, that I would try to traditionally publish. Like that was just what I knew as like how you get books published. And I had looked into self-publishing, several years ago when it was still, really just kind of like mostly vanity publishing. And I remember actually when KDP was launched and I like got an email about like you can submit books to Amazon to self-publish for free. And I'm like, this doesn't really like, I don't know. I didn't know how I felt about it. And so I never really looked into self-publishing again. I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to try one day to start querying. I got to get my book all polished and ready. And, I was in the processes of doing all that, going through revisions, looking up agents. Like I had not actually gotten to the querying portion when I attended a Q&A with a local author who had been traditionally published by one of the big five. I don't remember which one, but she had been traditionally published with a big publishing house, and she switched to self-publishing, and she gave us all these reasons why, and that just sold me. And I was like, hey, if it's good enough for her, like it's good enough for me. And I started looking into the differences more. And yeah, what Jasmine was saying is completely true. Like you have complete control over your project, over your title, your cover, your content. You don't necessarily think about the fact that like the title that you have, like a publisher could say, no, we're not going with that. Like all these things that you have that you love about your book. I mean, publishers can come and say, no, change this, change that, and I didn't want to give that up for one, but also, as Jasmine was saying, the marketing that people say, I want to traditionally publish because I'm terrible at marketing. I can't market. I want someone to do that for me. They don't give a lot of marketing budget to newer authors. From what I've heard from people who have done both, they say, they weren't happy with the marketing that they were getting, and they were still having to do a lot of it themselves. And I'm like, well, if you're having to do a lot of the marketing yourselves, they're taking a cut, and you don't have any more creative control over your projects, then why not self-publish? And that's when I started really looking into it and just decided, not even going to bother traditionally publishing, querying, just go straight into the self-publishing. And it's been great.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm going to mimic what Tiger said this morning on one of our first panels. He said he's not going to look down somebody if they showed up with a giant briefcase full of cash and wanted his book. And I think most of us were like, yeah, we're, big publisher wants to take our book and open some glass doors, sure. But like you said, CH, it's your book could be out there already. Both routes have a lot of work. As a day job, I'm an editor, but also a pitch coach. So both jobs are going to take a lot of work on the front end to get queried, to get accepted, and on the back end, because like you said, Angela, you do have to do a lot of your own marketing, unless you're one of those lucky lightning strike few that they're like, this is going to be the next big thing. But there's so many authors out there in the world, and how many do we really actually hear that much of by comparison? So, but in the indie scene, we're a big community, we're a big family. Very, very excited just to get to meet each other. And you're now here, and you can see 3 young adult epic fantasy authors. So if you've already followed CH or Jasmine or Angela, you can now follow the other 2 and have books to read in the interim. But talking about what's coming new from you guys, if there was one specific special thing this year that you definitely want everybody to be watching for, what would it be, CH?
I mean, you put me on the spot, so I'm just going to pretend like you didn't ask the question. Hey, I got book 2 coming out, so I definitely want you looking for that here in the next month or two, closer to 2. But I'm extremely excited about a collaboration with a group of indie authors in a short story, anthology that's a little different, as because all the stories are going to be connected, and it's going to take a little more work on my end to get it done that way. But it's going to be a great event for charity. We're going to make some money. We're going to tell some stories, and it's going to be really cool. I haven't really told everybody they're doing this yet. So if anybody in our group is watching, hey, you got some work to do here in the next few months. My bad.
We know who we are.
It's live. It's out there. Get ready for it. And I'm pretty close to giving you all the prologue here. So I'll be honest with you. I'm pretty excited about that. Every one of the writers is involved. I've read some of their work, and y'all are great. That's one of the reasons that we do work together on that. And love your writing. It's great, people. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of reading this year. Just saying, I don't think readers know how much their writers read. Especially good writers. Good writers tend to read way more books than they write in a year. So, yeah. How about you, Angela? If you have one thing for people to really keep an eye out for in 2023, what would it be?
Well, I am working really, really hard to get book 2 in my trilogy out by June or July. And I'm really excited about it. I really like the story that I have right now. I wasn't excited about it in the beginning of the year, and it took me a long time to get to this point to figure out, exactly the story that I was going to tell. But now that I figured it out, and it's, I've got even, the rest of the trilogy, like kind of that wrap up in my mind, and I've got some little Easter eggs, like breadcrumbs that I'm leaving, that I'm like really excited even to get to book 3 in. And so that should be, if everything goes well, June or July. I am going to be attending Storybound Fest, which is an indie author convention in Kansas City, Missouri. And I'm really, really hopeful to get book 2 out before Storybound Fest. So that is my goal for this year.
Yes, if you are a reader, I am not one of the guest authors of Storybound Fest. I'm on the wait list, but I think they're getting close to capping out. I was late, dragging my feet. If you're a reader and you love indie books, Storybound Fest looks amazing. I have never seen so many indie fantasy authors that I love in one place. It is extremely exciting. So good luck, Angela. So excited.
Thank you.
I actually got myself the hotel room because even if they don't pick me, I may still go as a guest just to meet so many of the authors.
I'm so excited to meet so many of the authors who are going. Like, I really am. I cannot wait. Like, just for that alone, aside from, me being there as an author, I'm like, oh my gosh, I get to meet all these authors.
Yes. And Jasmine, last but definitely not least, I know this year has just been a whirlwind. What would be the number one thing that you would have people looking for in 2023?
Yeah, I feel like it'd have to be Stormfire. I've been talking all about Stormfire, but I'm just really excited about this book. I think based on how well my mailing list is receiving it, I'm hoping that the rest of the market, you guys here listening, are going to like it too. If you really like epic fantasy coming of age, where you have innocent kid, forced by necessity, needing to grow up and become a hero eventually, I think this will be the story for you. But that is launching in 2 days. I would say that's the biggest thing. And I hope that anybody who reads it really enjoys it.
Yes, I've got everybody's links in the description box again if you're watching on YouTube. So you can click them all there, grab these books. If you're watching on Twitter and you're like, I want them, hop over to my YouTube to get it, or look up any of these authors on their social media, because the link should be in bios where those are. But there are so many projects for this year. I'm super excited just to hear what you got coming. CH, I feel like being the one I've talked to the most on these lives, watching a progression of your author journey from this time last year to the summer to now has just been inspiring. And I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you sharing your journey over the last year with the viewers. And thank you all so much. Happy New Year. If you're watching and you'd like to see the panels tomorrow, which includes a second young adult epic fantasy panel tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Central, hit the bell and you'll get a notification so that if you're in your post New Year's Eve slumber, you get, boom, here's the next panel. But we will catch you all next year. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.